I'm going to attempt doing it like this. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 13th live. And today we're going to talk about how to update a project with Init. It's a new feature that was recently added. We're going to talk about how to retrofit Init in existing projects that were handmade, either because they were made before Init was created, or just because reasons, right? We're going to talk about colors, and especially web colors and the literals that are supported in Arcs, and how to replace and expand on the color list if we want to. And we're also going to have a sneak peek at extension that is in the work. It's called Inspector, made by HKRT, and that will be probably the last thing we're going to cover today. So let's start by creating a new project within it. We're going to create one for the live 13 with the default parameters, mean that we're going to get the bundle extension and scroll extension by default. Okay. We are done here. So if we go to live 13 and build Windows 2022, there we go. That should be a solution. Oh, yeah, of course, I cannot open it like this. I started good. Anyway, let me open it from here. Okay, live. Build Windows. Oh, it's because it's... Okay, so I can, just with the right name. Okay, that's not a good start if I start making blunders right away. Anyway, let's build it in debug. Let's see if it works. As usual, we're going to have to do a few customizations for the live. So we're going to go to the config. Here we're going to remove these. We're going to go with 1080p and screen width. And screen height. What else do we need? The monitor. We are on the second monitor here. And lastly, we're going to do console font scale, and I believe we are using 3 usually. Okay, so hopefully you see this window here. Yeah, it looks like it's on the right place. And we have a nice big console. Okay. First thing we're going to do is that we are going to remove the sound. We're not going to do anything with sound today, so I'm just going to, yeah. So every time I start it, there we go. Okay, so let's talk about colors. First thing first, let's remove all this fancy stuff going on here. We see actually we have a color cycle that was made in the HSV space with U, that stands for hue saturation value. And here we have normalized parameter. Basically, we are going over the entire spectrum of the hue. So from red to green to blue to red with full saturation and full value. We're not going to use the color cycle today. We're just going to do a very simple test for colors. So by default, we should get a white object. And if we were to put a color, let's put like a nice red in RGB space. We have a red object. And a while ago, I don't exactly remember when, I added support for the HTML colors, so which means that we can use the names that are defined by the W3C. There's about 140 colors. Actually, there are supposed to be 140 defined, but there's 141 in the list we checked yesterday, both on Wikipedia and directly on W3C, so it doesn't really matter, but that was interesting thing to discover yesterday. So if I type red, we can see that we get a red color. And if you are not familiar with the list of colors, you can actually find them online. You can find them, you type HTML colors and you will be able to find them anywhere. And it's a list of predefined names with predefined values that all browsers know, at least modern browsers. And Orcs also know those names. So if we were to, I don't know, want to use something like plum, if I come back here and I type, okay, and I type plum, we get a plum logo. And also it works, as you can see, lowercase. You cannot do any kind of case. You can have camel case. Camel case will work. Lowercase will work. However, if I do something fancy like this is not going to work. It's going to be white. And it's not going to find, yeah, see, it tells us plum was found either lowercase or with camel case, but not the version we want. It's because we're actually using config keys, and config keys are case sensitive. So I do write aliases to get rid of spaces or not, and lowercase versus camel case, but that's about it. So for example, if we take one that is composed, let's take a different, like, I don't know, olive drab. So if I were to use this name, olive drab, it works. But if I were to put like a space between it will also work. And finally, with a space in lowercase, that would also work. It's just I define aliases for the version with space, no space, and lowercase and camel case. So there are 4 versions of them, and they are all aliasing to the original one, which is the camel case with a space. And we can actually find the list directly inside Docs by just saving the config file. If I were to save the file, and I don't know, like let's call it color list ini. And now we go back to the live. We go to the bin folder. We can see there's the color list ini. Let's put it in Sublime. So it's the entire config that was saved. Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but some people are noting that we are having a little bit of sound issue where you are a bit too saturated or something.
Okay.
So maybe pull the mic just a little bit away further.
There. Okay. How's that? Is it better?
What do you think, Nico? Okay, awesome. You're good to go. Thank you.
No worries. Excellent. So usually the issue was that the sound was too low. I guess now the sound is too loud. So going back to... Sorry, what?
I said not a bad spot to be in, I guess.
I guess not. So if we save the config, we can see the list of colors. At the beginning, there's the actual numerical values for the camel case with spaces, as mentioned earlier. And after that, we're going to see all the aliases. So like for every version, we have a lowercase alias. And if there was a space, there's also the lowercase with space and the camel case with no space. And you can see that they all alias to the camel case with spaces. So all those are baked inside Docs. What if you wanted to add your new colors? Or actually, let's start with redefining colors. Let's say that you like, for example, I don't know, like, go back to the list. Let's say that you like the olive, but you want it to be a bit more reddish for some reason. So here, if we look at the olive, we see that it's 128.280. And going back to here, I'm going to ask for my object to be olive. Getting rid of all this. And I want a redder version of it. So like it's, I want it, for example, let's say olive to be, I don't know, 160, 128, oops, 0. By just defining the section color in my main file and giving a value for this, we should have like a different version. Hopefully you can see that it's more yellow, more red. And that's the extent of the work you have to do to redefine colors. If you don't do it in the main config file, so for it to work, it has to be done before the config module initialized. So basically, you have to do it in your main config file or from a file that is included from the main config file. However, you can still do it later down the line. Like for example, let's say we don't do it here. We have our object that is very green. Let's find it. It's called object, I believe. And object, set position. We're going to move it a bit on the side. There we go. I don't know, like 100 minus 100. Maybe a bit more. There we go. We're going to create a new one, but with a new version of Olive. And to do this, all I have to do is set color Olive. And with my new version, which was 160.128.0. And now, if I create a new object, you see it has my new version of the Olive. I have overridden the color at runtime, and I can use it at any places where I would use colors. So RGB spaces, HSV, HSL, all will be supported. And I can override my colors. I can have the versions I want if I want to tweak them. But the thing is that we can also extend it. Let's say that now we want to have the color of magic. So Octarine. By default, there's no Octarine in Arcs. No color is found. It's going to be white. So the way to do this, as you probably gathered, is just to define it in the color section. And by defining it to... So I was looking for people to try to find an override of the color of magic. Let me see if I can find it. Where is it? I don't have it here. Okay, so some people say that it should be 208, 224, 15. So let's do this. So there we go. So obviously the color of magic, so Orcs cannot really represent, but let's take this version. By just creating this and starting it, we should have our color of magic pasted on, used for our object. And that you see that even though I only defined the uppercase variation, I was able to use the lowercase here. And actually, let's pretend that it's two words, Octarine. It will still work this way, because remember, we create aliases. So even if you create new version, as long as you provide the camel case with spaces, Orcs is going to create aliases for this color, and it's going to create an alias that's lowercase, so Octarine, an alias that is camel case with no spaces, and an alias that is lowercase with no spaces. So basically, all these four versions are going to work. So even if I did Octarine, it's still going to work. The aliases have been created by Orcs because it was able to pick your new color at the beginning and just create aliases based on this. And that's it for the expansion of colors. You can add as many colors as you want. They are all in config. And lastly, if you want to retrieve colors in code, you can still use literals as well. And we're just going to go here. We have a function that's called orcs config get color vector. And let's go into the right section. So it doesn't, you don't have to push the color section. This is like completely seamless to the user. So even if I was in config push section, let's add a new section called game, right? Orcs config pop section, and we're going to magic color. We're going to ask the color space, and we put it in a vector. V color. So let's do it. Orcs vector v color, and the color space. Let's do it in RGB. So orcs color space RGB. Okay, we're going to put a breakpoint here, and I'm going to add this like new section. So here we see that we have Octarine not defined. We only need this one here. We can do it like this. It's prettier. Now, if I add a game section and I say magic color. I want the octarine one. There we go. If I ask here to get color vector, it's going to be converted automatically in the color space I asked. So if we go here, we can see what's in our vector. Right now it's just garbage, it hasn't been initialized. And because I asked it in color space RGB, you can see that it has the values that were put for the R, the G, and the B. Those are normalized because it's the RGB color space. There are other color space I can use. I can ask it for being component. Those are not normalized. They are between 0 and 255. So if I do this and we look here, we can see that it's the color that we inputted, 208 to 224 and 15. And I can ask it in any other color space, including HSV and HSL. So HSL. And the color magic in HSL, it's this. And that means that you can use literals anywhere in your code and just have orcs translate them into whichever color space you want to use locally. And that's it for that. Any questions on colors? Okay.
I don't think so, but I think it's really nice that we can add our own custom colors.
Yes, definitely. So if the 140 is not good enough for you, you can add whatever shortcuts you want, which is also make it much easier to look in the code and tweak. If you have like the same color you're using in multiple places and you want to tweak it, before that, the only option you had would be to inherit from that value somewhere. Now you can just use like shortcuts that are just names for the colors, and that might be a bit more readable. But both options are still there. That's all I had for colors. Let's stay on the topic of config. So let's modify a bit our setup right now. Oops. We don't need this. We want to go back to our object. Okay. So removing this. This I'm just going to put on the top. I'm going to keep that color. Our object, it's not going to be a logo anymore. I want to keep the pivot as is, no more scale, the color is fine. It's going to be a text. And in our text, we're going to put lorem ipsum. And if I didn't make a mistake, we have lorem ipsum dead center with no scale, but don't worry about that, we won't read the text. It's just that right now it's been loaded from the config, and this key here is just a few bytes. And Aux, the way it loads config, it's by streaming. So even if you have like a config file that is, I don't know, dozens of megabytes or 100 megabytes or something like this, you won't allocate this in memory in one chunk to parse it. It's going to be streamed, and the streaming buffer size is 16 kilobytes, which means that any key cannot be bigger than 16 kilobytes, otherwise it won't be able to be captured by Aux. So let's see what we do if we have the very, very long text, for example. And for this, we're just going to generate a longer lorem ipsum. There is actually a generator here. And I'm going to go over the 16 kilobytes. I'm going to ask for 20,000 bytes. Generate it, please. There we go. So I'm not saying that you should like do entire book in a config variable, but let's see if for some reason we wanted to do this. We're going to copy this, and instead of having this, we're going to go there and going to paste the entire thing here. If I do this, it's not going to work. It's just going to fail and won't be able to load the config. So let's put this somewhere else, right? Okay, so I'm just going to put a temp one just to see that it still works, and I can control and to see if it's been overwritten or not. And we're going to create, I don't know, long text.ini. And we're going to create a file. So text file, and we're going to say that it's object string equals, and there we go. We're back here. We're going to save this in data and in config, and we said it's non-text.init. There we go. Okay, so just going to remove this. There. If I do it like this, it's still not going to work, right? Same issue, we just I moved it to a separate file. So what can I do here? So instead of loading it like this, we're going to load it in code. And we're going to go here, and we're going to do that very simply. We know that the resource, the config file, which is a resource, is called non-text.ini. We're going to add the resource system to locate it for us, to load it for us. We're going to create a temporary buffer where we're going to put everything in it, and we're going to ask the config module to process that buffer for us. If we provide the buffer, Arcs will not do any allocation. It's not going to do a streaming parsing or anything. It's just going to use the buffer as is for generating the config. So let's start. First, we need to find the location. So const arc string z resource, and we want to locate it. Resource locate. Oh, right. I forgot to make it more visible. There we go. Sorry about this. We're going to locate the resource. We say that it's a text config. That's not at all. It's long text.ini, and that's not the group. That's actually the group is the config group, and so I could even put config like this, but they're actually defined in arcs. If I look at arcs config kz resource group, and that's basically config, and I'm going to look for long text.ini. If it's found, we're going to open that resource. So arcs handle h resource equal arcs resource open. We're going to open the location that we found, and no, I don't want to erase it. If we were able to open it, meaning that it's not undefined handle, I really cannot type today. Handle undefined. Now we're going to read it, process it, and close it. So because we open it, we're going to close it. So arcs resource close h resource. But before this, we're going to get its size. So 64 size, and arcs resource get size alpha resource, and we're going to allocate a buffer because I know it's 20 kilobytes and I know that I have that space on the stack. I'm just going to put it on the stack. However, you can definitely allocate it on the heap with arcs memory allocate, and then you have to free it. I'm just going to put it on the stack here. So arcs car buffer arcs car, and we're going to use allocar, and what we want is the size. Each character is 1 byte, so basically I just want to allocate the size of the buffer here. Now that I have this, we're going to read and fill it. So arcs resource read. We want to read this resource with the entire resource. So, oops. And we put it in the buffer. We don't provide any callback. So because we don't provide any callback, it means it's going to be a blocking call. It's not going to be asynchronous. It's going to read right there. And when the function exists, I know that my data will be ready. If I wanted to do it asynchronously, I can put, I can pass callback, and then I will do the processing in the callback. That's not what I want to do here. So we're just going to do this, and we can verify if it's correct. So this should have read exactly what we asked, which is this. And if that has worked, we can finally load our config from memory. So basically, I give it the buffer and the size. Oh, it's an arc32. And sorry, the size. Okay. Hopefully, I didn't make any mistake. Let's go with the debugger just in case. We have the location of the resource. You see that he found it. It's a file type, and he found it in data config. So resource acquired. We were able to open the resource. We have a handle. The size of the resource is this, which is probably just a bit over 20 kilobytes. Yeah, 20 and 160. We're going to allocate this on the stack. We're going to read into it. Done. So now if I look at the content, we can see that we have our lorem ipsum. Okay. Visual, please close it. Why is... Okay, what's going on there? Why is my mouse... Thank you. Yeah, I guess it popped on my other screen. You didn't see it. Anyway, let's do this again. Sorry. I see buffer. I want view. And there you go. Okay, so now you can see that the buffer is here with all the content. And we're going to ask to load it from memory and press F10. We can look at the return. Return says success, so hopefully it's been loaded. And let's check. And we can see that our text now is the entire lorem ipsum, and that we bypass the size, the limitation of the streaming buffer for the config. And we can actually make sure that everything has been loaded by just looking at the last line. It's this one. I'm not going to read it. And an easy way to find it is going to say that the pivot, we're going to want bottom left. So I'm going to remove the breakpoint. You can see that it's this, and actually, you know what? We can even do better than this. We're going to give it a size, and we're only going to give it an horizontal size. So let's say 600 characters horizontally. And it's going to confine and wrap the text. And we can see that the text is entirely here, and we've been able to load something that is more than 16 kilobytes. And that's all there is to it. You can load any size of resource, and if it's a config, you can just pass the buffer to the load from memory, and it's going to be processed. Is there any question on this one?
I didn't see any so far, but we'll let you know if we see any.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next topic then, in that case, which is right, using the CodeList for shaders. So let's stay with this project. Let's go back to what we had before, the logo. Oh, actually, no, we're just going to do like with a square. So let's do a square of 50 by 50 with the pivot center. Now we'll keep the color. Going to have a texture which is pixel, and we should have a nice octarine square in the middle of the screen. Excellent. So let's add a shader to it. So I'm going myself as a shader, and usually we use the code property to add our GLSL shader. So void main. I'm going to have a very simple shader. We're going to do frag color equals vec4, and we're going to override the color. So basically, let's go with red. Oops. Let's see if this works. Okay, we see that we overwrote the color for the shader. We are going to do something a bit different here, just to verify it still works. We're going to use the color that's passed to it. And again, it's a very simple shader that does nothing interesting, and that was actually not working. There was an error. Let me check what it said. Variable GL, because what did I mess up here? Is it child color with no underscore? No. Is deprecated. Undefined variable gel color. Okay. Too much data in type constructors. Okay, you know what? We're going to do it back. RGB, maybe, because it was a 4. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Gel color is already 4, a vec 4 and not a vec 3. So I just want the RGB one, and just to verify it's working, let's say that we want a red. Yeah, okay, everything works. So let's say that for some reason now I want to have my color coming from a function. Let's call it get color. And this is going to be very basic. Vec4 return GL color RGB with a full alpha. And here, instead of doing this, I'm going to call get color. It should still be working. Excellent. But let's say that this function here, I want to reuse in a lot of different shaders, right? I don't want to copy paste it every time. I want to be able to reuse it. That's where the code list becomes handy. So right now it's not doing anything very interesting. But let's say, for example, you have like helper functions, like being able to convert from RGB to HSL and back from HSL to RGB, or anything that you want to reuse, right? So here, let's pretend that my get color does something very fancy that I want to use in a lot of different shaders. The way I'm going to do this is I'm actually going to separate and create like a library of functions. So I'm going to put this in my library, and I'm just calling this section shader. You can call it the way you want. And I'm going to say, okay, I have a shader here, which is going basically to be this function here. So get color. I have now a function in this property, and I want to be able to compose it in this. So if I keep only this, it will not be able to find get color, right? Because it has nowhere to find it. And you can see undefined variable get color, not working. So what if I do something different? Let's say that this main part is only something I want to keep for my object. It does something, I don't know, very specific. I'm going to call it something else than code just to not be confusing. I will call it main. Now in my shader, instead of having code, there's also a property which is called list. And code list, I pass a list of keys to compose the shader, and it's going to be composed in the order of declaration of those keys. So I first want the get color, then I want main. The thing is that there is no get color key right now in this object here. So what I do is just, I say I want to get it from my shader. So now get color is going to reference the one from shader, which is the one here. And this should compile again. We are going to compile a shader that is made of the content of get color and the content of main. And let's check this. We can see that there's no complaint. And just to verify that it works, we're just going to change my function here and say that we're going to put yellow. And you can see that my shader has been compiled with this common function now, and I could use this one across multiple shaders, and you can build your library of function and just import the one you want and compose your final shaders this way. Any question on this? I take that as no.
Correct.
Excellent. So let's go back to, actually it went back, but let's go to the interesting part of this slide, which is Init and how to update projects. So if you remember at the beginning of the session, I created the project with this command here. Okay. I created it with init live 13. And by default, it has the extension C++ bundle and scroll, and it created this. You can see there's a plus here. A plus means that it created the files. The files were not there, they were added. So we added files for the build, all the data config files, some example files for the sound and the logo, a file for the extension where all the code of the extension is now, and the external dependencies for the extension. Like the bundle one is using LZ4 as compression library. So bundle extension is going to bring LZ4, and scroll is bringing scroll, and then we have the default files for an object in scroll and the live13, which was the name of the project. So if we go back here and we want to update it, if I pass the same parameters, it's going to update the extension that are already present, but it's not going to overwrite any changes I made in the main file. So the little exclamation mark here tells you which files were already present and were overwritten. So basically, all the extension stuff has been overwritten. You should never write anything in this file. It's automatically generated every time init is called. It's been overwriting LZ4 so that if you have a new version of LZ4, it's going to be picked up. Same thing with bundle, and LZ4 is coming because of bundle, and something with scroll, but nothing else has been modified. So if we come back here, we reload the project that has been regenerated, we see that our config is exactly as we left it, and same for our code. The code we changes in this did not change, and it's still there. It's still compiled, and it still run exactly in the same state it was before. What if I want to add some extension? Let's do this. We're going to say that we want to have the movie extension and the SNDH, and say that we don't want the bundle anymore. So we're going to do this, and we can see that now the files that were common were overwritten, and you can see with exclamation mark. A file that has been added, are marked with a plus. So basically, the movie example and the SNDH example have been added with a plus, and the bundle ones were removed. So there's a little minus in front of the line. So the entire D4 has been removed. The aux bundle has been removed. We have now a new movie extension with its dependencies, which is based on a PLM-PEG, and something for SNDH. It's based on Atari audio. Everything has been added. But if I come back here and I build it, you can see that it's still in the same state with my exact change as before, just that now I have access to the new extensions. How do I know how to use those extensions? If you remember, when we create a project from scratch, it will put examples for you to be able to look at. But now it cannot change this file anymore, because otherwise it would overwrite my main config. So the way it works is that we have a new template file. If you remember, we have the creation and settings template that has been with org since the dawn of time almost. And we have a new one just for Init project, which is called extension template. And it has the same beginning with all the syntax for the config. And at the very bottom, you can see the extension that we installed. So this content will only tell you about the extension that are installed for this project. So basically, the movie one and the SNDH one, and it tells you how to use them. So movie, you have a movie property to add to your object with a path to the MPEG, and only MPEG-1 video with MPT audio is supported. And same for SNDH, you pass a SNDH file, and then you can optionally pass a track number, and it says that it supports Atari SNDH. So let's try it. Let's say that our object is not this anymore. You know what? Let's get rid of this. We are going to say that we want a movie from this. And if we go back to the extension here, we can see that the resource, we also have to provide a new group movie with a path for. So if we look at the resource, we're going to say that our movie, I'm going to skip bundles because we're not using bundles. So I'm going to say movie, I believe it's data movie. And the movie, I think, is called logo.mpeg. Let's verify if it works. Oh, and of course, I'm going to remove the size because otherwise we're only going to see 50-50 of the entire movie. And we can see that the movie is being played, and in red because I did not remove the color red from the config. So movie is working. Let's try the SNDH. SNDH, and same thing. I believe that this time it's sound, so we can verify it. Sound, and we have to have a path to music. So basically, here we want data, and I think I put in music. Let's verify this. And it's robocode SNDH that comes with it. And it's working. So the examples have been added to it when we update it, and it doesn't really matter. You don't have to delete them, because when you're going to ship the game with a bundle extension, if you're not using the examples, they are not going to be picked by the bundle anyway. So there's really no point in removing them every time you update your project. But yeah, so if we go back to this and want to make yet a new update, and let's say we want to go back to what we had at the beginning. So bundle, no movie, no SNDH. You can see that the music and the movie data has been removed. The aux movie extension has been removed. The SNDH and dependency have been removed. Scroll has been updated. We added again at Z4 and the bundle extension. And here we reload it. And now if we look at the extension template, we can see that bundle is present. Now you can see what comes from just the bundle, and you can see that movie SNDH were removed because those extensions are not part anymore. So this template file is dynamic and will only reflect the extension that you've used when updating your project or when setting it up originally. And yes, so, and the bundle here is back. It was actually removed, and we can actually double check this. If we go back like this, after reloading, you can see that there's no more bundle here. But if we re-add bundle and we reload, bundle is back. And now if we have movie is not recognized, so we have nothing on screen. And that's it. Couldn't get text or texture for graphic because there's none. Yeah, that's basically it. Is there any question on this? Okay, I take that as no. Let's go back
Sausage
to...
said it's a great improvement for the dev experience.
Oh yes, I totally agree. And even for people making extensions, because now you can work in the source file for the extension and update your project and see if it works. Before that, I had to actually create a separate project, make all the extension code, and copy paste it to the aux repository every time I wanted to make a change. Now it's the exact opposite. I can do it in the source files inside the aux template folder and just update my project and see if it works. So it's a much better experience also when developing extensions. Let's go back to having texture, which was logo dot... was it PNG? I don't remember. I think it's a WebP. Yeah, okay. Any questions on updating extensions? So we've seen the logs that tell you exactly what was modified. We've seen the extension template that is dynamic. There are some limitations, however. You cannot update and change the type of project between C and C++, because C and C++ are very different. Any code that you would have written in these files here would not work anymore if I were to migrate to a C project. So that would be like very confusing for the compiler, and everything would be broken. So once you started a project in C or in C++, you have to stick with it when you update it, or you have to do a manual upgrade later down the line. And the same idea, if you have a C++ project with scroll, you cannot then remove scroll, because again, everything will be broken. So once you have picked C or C++ or scroll, not scroll, you have to stick with it later down the line. Right now, nothing prevents you from like asking those kind of updates, but you will end up with a broken project. So you cannot the transition between C and C++ and between scroll and non-scroll. You have to stick with those. But that's basically I know it's not the only constraint. The other constraint is that, as we've seen earlier, the demo the demo movie, the demo audio that are output originally when you start a project for the first time, they will not be added when you add a new extension over time. However, you can, they're just examples, right? You can just go to the template and see how to use those extensions. So that's the only other limitation there. Yeah, and I think that's it for it. So unless there's any other questions, maybe we can add a new extension to this project, which is the inspector one, and see how it works. How does it sound?
Sounds good.
Excellent. So let's go. We added the inspector. As you can see, now we have imgui that comes because the inspector triggers imgui. As you can see, it relies on imgui for its UI. So imgui has been added to the project, and the inspector itself is here. It's been added as well. So now we have a project that we reload. We can see here that we have a new section for the inspector. It's basically, we can override the shader that comes by default for the highlight. We can change the default window size for when creating a new inspector, and we can bind any kind of input we want to inspect objects. By default, because I did not create the project with inspector, we're going to have to add that input. So I can put it anywhere. It's in the inspector. I'm going to add it to mouse right, and I want it to be able to inspect. So building it, running it, we can see there's an object. Let's scale it down a bit so that we can see better. Object, I think the original scale was 0.25. And let's put an angular velocity back so that it sounds a bit. Velocity 90. Why not? Okay, that's a bit aggressive, but anyway. If I were to right-click this object, there's a new inspector. And this work, by the way, was done by HCarty. I've only done a pass of making sure that it sticks to the orgs guidelines, but the entire development of this extension is not my doing. It's really HCarty's work, so all the kudos to him. In this window here, which is based on imgui, and you can resize it the way you want, you can see the current state of the object, including the position, the speed, the rotation, how long it's been created, and you can see there's an highlight. The highlight is optional. You can toggle it on and off, and it will follow the contour of your object. This one here is purple, but the colors are picked to cover a different the entire spectrum. So for example, if I were to create another object create object, and of course I put it right on top, so not much easier. Let's pick this one. See, this one was picked with yellow, and it's going to be really hard to pick that. Oh, I got the third one as well. So there's a yellow one, a greenish one, and I don't know if you see the difference. It's a bit subtle. Let's remove this one here. There's a yellow and the purple one, and as you can see, I can modify the size of the window. If I were to restart the project, and if I were to pick it again, it will remember the size of my window, so you don't have to change it every time. And on top of the live properties, you can see a bunch of things as well. You can see if there's any parents. Here you can see the scene. I could inspect the scene as well. See that there's children, only one child here. You can see the config that was used to create those objects. So the scene, there was only a child list that was continuing object. Here you can see that the config object had a graphic which is itself, and you can see all the different properties. I'm not sure why this one is here, but there we go. And there's still a string that is defined. Did I define a string here? I'm not sure why the string here is object. Okay, so this one I'm not exactly sure, but basically you can see the config for objects, and you can see also the graphic. You can see the texture, you can see if it's been flipped, and on which axis it's been flipped. And this will probably be extended over time. I will give the microphone to HKRT to give more details. That's just a very high level explanation of the current extension. So HKRT, you can take it from there, and I can try to follow and do interaction if you want.
Sure, yeah. This was kind of came out of wanting to learn how to use Dear IAM GUI with orcs, and it started out with basically that top status section, just having a quick view of a GUID, and then the copy was there so that you could copy that and put it into the console, which is still possible. You can copy their Control V it into console and run commands with an object, do it that way, and then started adding more and more pieces over time. It's it's pretty straightforward, as Ram showed earlier. If you close a window, it goes away or removes the outline shader. And similarly, like then in the scene window, if you were to close the object window and then click on inspect in the scene window, it'll pop up there, so you can create say like a scene inspector object. If you have a parent scene object, and then look at all the children. If there were other siblings, you can see sibling objects. If you see, we can set up some sibling objects and check that out that way. And then similarly, we can start with the sibling objects. Then along with that, there's a command to create an inspector window for an object, which we can show. If you create a fresh init project, if I recall correctly, I think it has that command on create to create the initial window. We can see the sibling relationship here. So on the bottom, the siblings there, and and you get the highlighting and display of the object there. The other piece that's another part that may be interesting is for config. As Ram showed, with if you have inheritance, then you can see that kind of hierarchy of config inheritance. And then finally, that config is all editable. You can edit it, and then in this case, because the say like the spinning logo, it doesn't read any of the values at runtime. But if you were to change a value here and then create a new object, you can see that that updated color is reflected, so that it is like the edits that you make inside of the inspector here are reflected back into the config system. I think those were the main points I had in mind. If there are any features that you think of that are missing or that would be useful here, please reach out. Similarly, if you have a better handle on fragment shaders, and want to make some improvements on the highlighting, that would be great too. Otherwise, I think that's all I had in mind myself to talk about. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much, and thank you for making the the extension in the first place. As we said, it's a work in progress. Right now, it's in its own branch. It's not in the main one, but it will probably be merged very soon, and it will be expanded over time, right? So it's a very capable first version, but maybe later we will have things like being able to save back the config to file or something like this. to be defined, I assume. And again, as HKRT said, if you have like any requests for features or any suggestion, please do it on Discord. And yeah, any suggestion, any comment are always valuable. Yeah, thank you so much for taking for speaking about this on the spot. There was no rehearsal there. I think the last topic we have for today is actually retrofit Init to an existing project. So unless you have any questions to what we've seen so far, let's get to it. All good? Excellent.
I think we're good to go.
Okay. Well, so right now I am going to create a new project. So it was a project. I can close all this there. By we, I meant Nico, Wayne, and myself made a game entry for the low-res jam of 2016 with orcs. And back then, Init was not a thing. Init was created in summer of 2017, so it's been 7 years now. But there still might be recent projects that were created by hand. And let's see how we can retrofit Init so that we can enjoy the future extension upgrade with just one command line, as we've seen so far. So we're going to create a new project calling it Iterbytes. And I want to be able to have the bundle and scroll, and that's all I need. So there we go. Now I have my project created. I should not need this window anymore. What I will need, though, is the old project and the new project. So the new project is not the Live 13. It's going to be Iterbyte here. That's the one that we created. So if we were to build this one, let's actually build it. Windows, VS 2022, Iterbyte. We have the usual, I'm just going to make a quick modification in the config, Iterbyte, just making sure that you see things when I start it. We have a default project with a logo and nothing new here. Let's actually see what Iterbyte is all about. It was for the low-res jam, so basically it's a 64 by 64 game that was zoomed so that it's not just a stamp on your screen, but the internal resolution is still 64 by 64. So let's run it. Hopefully you see the game. And it's a simple game where we can play a little ship and destroying aliens and their waves coming at you. And a bit of screen, you can navigate and shoot. And it's a high score based game. And there you go. This was made before Init. So let's quit the game. And that's what we want. Right now, the Iterbyte game, if we were to look at the source code, it's very simple. And basically, it's one file for the entire game and one which was an old extension for orcs called archive that has been since deprecated because we have the bundle now, which is much more capable than archive. The archive was just being able to load resources from a zip file, and that's what Iterbyte was doing. So if I was looking at this here and the export, we can see that when we were exporting the game, we had an override for people who wanted to override their key config. We had all the data into a YTB file, which is about a bit less than 2 megabytes. We have the DLL of orgs, a README, and the executable, and you can see that that's all it takes. If we look at the data, however, and that's an interesting thing, we can just rename it as a zip. And it's just a zip file. So everything is there, there's no encryption, and everything is at the same level, which means that you could not have multiple resources with the same name in different folders because everything is just at one level. That was the limitation of the old archive. It wasn't even an extension, it was a module, and it was a proof of concept. So this does not exist anymore. We're going to convert the new game to bundle, and you will see that it's very easy to do. So I'm just going to put this back, make sure that it still works. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to look at the old organization of this project, and we're going to copy things to the new one. So the new one has all the includes here. We're not going to use the object that comes with scroll, and we can keep everything else. We have the extension that we're not going to touch. We have the bundle that we have here, and we have an iterbyte.h. We're not going to use this one. We're going to use the one that was defined here. So scroll, we're keeping the new version of scroll, but we're going to keep the game include. And similarly for the source, if we go to the source, we not going to use the object. We're going to carry over the source file of the game. I'm not erasing this one yet because I want to look at how it's made so that I can update the old source code. And lastly, the last thing we're going to move is the data. So basically, if we go to here, we can see that the new has a config, sound, and texture. There is no texture in the old iterbyte, so we won't need this. However, we're going to need this. Replace. There. So we have the data that's been copied. We should not need the old project anymore. So let's see how it works now. First things, we're going to look at the source code. This is the old iterbyte, and this is the old project, and this is the one that we just created with default project. So what we want to bring is the extension. What we want to remove is the archive. So we're just going to look for mention of archive, and we're going to remove that. We are not going to initialize the archive anymore, and that was all for the archive. Very easy to remove. Extensions, we're going to look for extensions in here. We see that there's an include to carry over, sorry. We're going to put it here. Then next we need to init the extension. We're going to copy that in the init here. We're just going to do it at the beginning. Then if we look for extension some more, we need to exit from all the extension. So we're going to exit from the extension after doing the save. And I think there's the bootstrap for the extension. And same thing here, we're going to go to the bootstrap, and we're going to bootstrap the extension. And that's it. We don't have anything else to carry over. So we can actually, oh, you know what, we can carry over this. It's for laptops to request the discrete GPU and not run in the embedded one. And I don't think we had it back then, so I'm just going to add this. And yeah, that's all. So now I'm going to remove iterbyte and single buffer, and I'm going to remove iterbyte. Now, if I were to regenerate the build, and if we were to rebuild it, we're going to see that it's not going to work entirely. The project was made with a version of Orcs that was made 8 years ago, and there have been a few breaking changes, but not too many. So we're going to tackle them one by one. But first, the last thing I want to change here, if we look at the codes, and if we go to the bootstrap function, we can see that I had some bootstrapping for like the old data YTB file from the archive. I don't need this anymore. I just want the data config, which is just one folder up, whereas my old hierarchy was using 2 folders up for development. I don't have this anymore. I don't need this anymore either. And what I do need is to open the data and the config, and there is iterbyte ini, and you can see that we're going to remove the old archive here, and we're also going to remove the extra path, and we're going to add a new bundle one. So it's going to be bundle if you want to embed it inside the editable, or otherwise we're going to keep the nomenclature of using OBR file. It could be anything, but sounds good. We don't need the config, it's done in code, so we only need the texture and sound. And I think that's all we need to do for the resources. Let's fix those issues. We have a getList counter that was renamed in more properly getList count. So if I do getList counter, we can modify them all at once. Done. What do we have? We have a listener position. The listener position has changed a bit. Now I can have multiple listeners. Back then with OpenAL, we only had one listener. Now we can have multiple one. So I'm going to use the first one. Let's build. And we don't need this win main anymore, just the plain main. And it compiled, but it crashes. Let's see what's going on here. We can see there's an assert that we hit when setting the listener. It says, oh, the index is less than the number of listeners. And we can see there were only 0 listeners defined. It's because now you have to request listeners. So basically, in the config file here, I can go to sound system and say I want 1 listener. Let's try this again. And basically that was it. We have the game running. So now we can update that project with Init like we did. Like we can add new extension, remove extension, add the inspector if we wanted, and it's going to be working just fine. And I can build. Oh, I have to rebuild it because the inspector as in GUI. Okay, I have to rebuild the whole thing. Rebuild. No, what did I mess up? Okay, you know what? We're not going to mess up with the inspector right now. Without GUI, we're going back here. Oh, I know why. Why? Because every time I do this, it expects my source file to be etabyte, right? And I kept the old name, which was LRJ. So if we look at the etabyte, it's going to add. It's my own fault. I should have renamed everything etabyte here, so I can actually do it. Etabyte. This way, it's going to be compatible. And removing this one, and this is etabyte. Okay, so now it should work. Let's try this again. Reload. Okay, and of course, include etabyte. There we go. Now my project is compatible with Init, and I can add stuff, and I can add and remove extension, like removing the inspector. Very easy. Reload, rebuild, no more inspector anymore, and it's still working. What if I want to bundle it? Remember, it was using the archive, and now I want to bundle it, and it's very simple. All I have to do is build the bundle version, and I run it. And you can see that it picks a lot of things, including my save file, because it was not excluded. So that's what we're going to do here. I have a file called, I believe, if I go to data config, I have a dev.ini where I have my local override, and I'm going to add bundle, exclude list, and my save file. And now if I run it again, okay, it's been skipped, and everything else has been bundled in etabyte.obr. And if we look at the bin here, we have about the same size as before, so slightly less than 2 megabytes. It's all the content that's here, and we can actually, you know what, I want to embed it directly in the executable because it's a small file anyway. So I'm just going to say, don't generate a separate file, just generate source file for it. So running it, and it generated it in bundle data.inc. We can find it here, and all the data is now in source form. So if I were to build the release version of it, it's working. And just to verify that it's working properly, we can take the exe, which is 2 megabytes now, and the DLL, just taking these. Let's go at the source here, putting them here, and that should work just fine. There we go. All the data and the bundle. So it was almost effortless to update this project. So obviously it depends on the kind of architecture you have for your own project, but retrofitting Init in a project should be like, maybe if it's not the few minutes like I did right now, even with the 8-year-old project, It might be maybe an hour, a couple of hours max, and then you can update your project as much as you want within it, and you can modify it. One thing that you might not have noticed, but the old Etherbyte had an icon that is not apparent here anymore. And to fix this, there's a resource file, which is in data resource here. And this one is not included anymore. So all I have to do is go into my build and open this one here. And I will say, I want you to embed also the resource file. So I think it's at the end. Yeah, I want you to, to take it, I think it's from data resource, and it's RC. There we go. And by running premake, now if I were to reload, and if I were to build, no matter the version, and if I look at, no, that's not the right one. If I look at this one here, you can see that it's tiny, but you can see that the icon is now embedded. It picked the RC file, and actually you should be able to see it from data resource. The RC file has been embedded, and now we have a proper icon, and we have the proper, not just the icon, but all the information that comes from the resource file on Windows. So if we look at details, we can see LoRa Jam 2016 and everything is. And I think that's basically it for retrofitting Init in an existing project. Do you have any questions there? Okay, then.
I don't think so, but let's give it a sec.
Sure. Any question in general, not just on the topics that were covered today, but on anything else?
You mentioned async loading of resources earlier.
Yep.
When you're creating an object, if you need to do some sort of asynchronous loading, like you're loading a large volume of data or something before you can app data or texture data or whatever that may take a finite amount of time. How would you recommend doing that so that you don't have just like a hard pause in the game? Would you do some sort of like imposter, like temporary object that would
It's a good question.
kick off like an asynchronous operation? It's not something I've tried in Orcs before, and I was curious kind of what
That's a good question.
Orcs approach would be to that.
So the good thing is that if you're using any resources that Orcs knows about, like texture or sound, they're already all loaded asynchronously by default. You can do it synchronously if you want, but by default they're asynchronous. And you can actually even change the default texture, the temporary texture. Right now it's just a transparent texture, so you don't see anything popping, but you can actually have like a lot of game engine having a bright purple texture for things that have not been loaded or something similar. You can do it with Orcs, and let's have a quick look at it. So if we go back to our source code of the live today, where we create the scene create an object, and currently what did we have the logo, yeah, right? So the logo file is probably not very big. Let's have a look. If we go back here, my 13 data texture, it's 1.58 kilobytes. Let me try to find a much larger texture, like really big, and I have something in mind. Let's cut 0, 13 megabytes. That's not enough. So let's modify size. The biggest one I have are like 66 megabytes. It's still a difference. Okay. The copy working. There we go. There we go. Let's say we're going to use this texture, which is 64 megabytes compressed, but it's actually 8,000 times 8,000. So it's actually 256 megabytes of data in memory. So it's going to take a little while, and it's probably not going to be very, very noticeable right now, but it's going to have a hitch, right? If we were having it blocking. So we're going to try to load it blocking and non-blocking and see how it works. By default, it's going to be asynchronous. It's going to be non-blocking. So if we go to our live.ini and instead of logging, what's the name of the texture already? Scale UI.png. Scale UI.png. If we were to load this, yeah, see, it took a little while, but the game is actually running. And the way to see that the game is running and not pausing, we're just going to give an angular velocity on our little text. And you can see that while it's processing things, the game is running and the texture was loaded in the background completely asynchronously. And this is in debug. If I were to do it in release, it's probably going to be a bit faster. Let's do this again. Much faster. But if we were to do it blocking, it would definitely be a hitch. It's just that by default, Arcs does it asynchronously. And the way it works is that if we go in live here, before we create this, we're going to say, don't load texture asynchronously. And for this, we have Arcs display set temp bitmap. If we pass a bitmap, that's going to be a temporary bitmap, and that also means that any texture load are going to be asynchronous. If we don't pass anything, it means all the texture load are going to be synchronous. So by doing this and creating the object afterward, it's going to freeze during the loading. And actually, yeah, we didn't see anything displayed because we do it at init. So there it's loading and all the rendering is blocked until the texture is loaded. If we don't do this, it's completely asynchronous. Now, if you want to add your own set of data, which are not sound, which are not texture, like for example, here we had some config, but let's say you have other things, like you want to display a 3D object with your own code, you need to load mesh, or you need to load a dictionary for a word game or something like this. The way you would do it, instead of doing config, a resource, synchronous resource read, you provide a callback here, and that callback just says that this read is going to be asynchronous, and the data will be available when this callback is going to fire. So in this case, let's see how it works. If we remember here, we're going to go back to, okay, let's remove a bit. Let's go back to where we were earlier. With our object, and our object we don't want, okay, let's remove this. And no scale, no angular velocity. We want a text instead. And string, remember we had temp, and we still have the file, hopefully, if I didn't make any mistake. Yeah, we still have that huge text here. So if we wanted that text to be loaded asynchronously and still be able to update this, we would put a callback here. So let's see what kind of callback we need. We need a resource op function. Let's create one. So it's a void, fast call, my callback, and it takes all those parameters. Because here we don't care of the type of resource and the size and buffer, none of the parameters, we just know what it is. What we're going to do here is remove the if. Oh, by the way, when a call is going to be asynchronous, this returns -1 to let you know that it's pending. In the callback, we're just going to load the config here, which the buffer it's p buffer, and the size is this. Okay, and because if I were to create the object right now, this won't be there in time. So if we compile, and it's not compiling because we need args car buffer. we can see it's temp because we didn't have time to load the entire config file before creating the object. So you would have to delay the object creation. Oops. And you should do it only once the callback is over. So here, actually, because it's it's live 13, get instance, create object. If we do this, even though it's been created asynchronously, it's not working. So what's going on here? I did not try that yesterday. Let's see if we can debug it. Okay, this is not firing. It's because I did not pass my callback. Not going to work. Okay, let's try this again. Oh, okay, that's not good. That's really not good. We have a clear bitmap, render all, update. Okay, I broke everything apparently. What did I do? Okay, so my callback is going to fire. Let's not create the object in this. Yeah, so okay, I broke something here. I'm sorry. It might be probably very obvious, but as always, when I'm trying to talk at the same time I'm doing things. Yes, I know what it is. Remember, I allocated on the stack because I was processing it right now. Well, now I'm not processing it right now, so I have to actually allocate it out of the stack. Aux memory, allocate, and we want the size. And aux memory type main, sure, doesn't matter. Here we're going to have a leak, means that we're going to have to free this here. So loading it here, and aux memory free pbuffer. And let's see if this is better. There, fixed. So now we have asynchronous loading from this part here. So it's not blocking anymore, but obviously I cannot create my object until this is ready. So that's the counterpart. If you have to wait for it to be done on a different thread, then you have to wait for it to be able to create your object. Keep in mind that your callback is going to be called not on the workers thread, but on the main thread once everything is ready. So here you can call any aux related stuff. There's no need to be worried about multi-threading or race conditions or things like this. This is going to be run on the main thread, the callback itself. Does it answer your question?
Yes, that was exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Perfect. Happy to help you. Any other questions? Well, I guess we are done. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry we went a bit over 1 hour mark, but as always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them on the forum. Otherwise, I wish you all a good summer, and I will see you in fall. Thank you for coming, and have a good day.
Thanks, Ron. That was awesome.
Thank you.